Hi, this is Mrs. Thompson, and this is the first in a series of videos that are aimed at helping you be organized so that you come back in the fall ready to go for the college application process. So, what should I be doing this summer? Our goals here are really to try to minimize your work effort by completing the fewest number of completely unique applications and writing the fewest number of unique essays. So, to do that, we're going to spend some time organizing before we really do anything. Another goal is to make sure that we're meeting all of the deadlines, getting everything done on time, which in the land of admissions, I'll tell you, should be about 3 to 5 days early to allow for any time that things could possibly go wrong. You'll still make it on time if you aim for a little bit early. We want to make sure that you're doing the best job possible on each and every application that you are spending your time to submit, which will in turn maximize your chances of admission and merit aid from those schools. And to do that, it's really important that you apply to a manageable, balanced list of schools. So let's get started and get organized. The first thing I really want you to do is to spend some time pulling together the different college requirements. I've linked for you here if you go into the email that I've sent and you also look at the actual slides for this presentation. This will be a clickable link. And there's also a link in your SCORE profile on your My Drive page in SCORE that will have something called a college application tracker. When you click on it, it will prompt you to make a copy of this spreadsheet that you send right over into your school Google Drive. You can customize that spreadsheet to keep track of all the different school requirements. Now, are you required to use this? No. Do I really care if you do? No. You can use whatever you want. Old-fashioned paper, some app on your phone, doesn't matter to me. The important thing is that you find a place to pull all of this information into one place for all the schools you're applying to. So how are we going to gather information? We're going to go to each of the colleges that we're looking at. We're going to go to their undergraduate admission website, look for information for first-year students. And what you're really looking for is some type of a checklist that tells you what are the required things that are a part of the application. So what kinds of things are going to be included there? There's going to be information about whether test scores are required or optional, whether the school wants a transcript or self-reported grades and how they should receive those things. Info about recommendations, how many do they require? Are they specific about who they need to come from? This type of information that you see here on the screen. So what we want to do is we want to put all this together for each and every school so that we can get a big look at what we're dealing with here. Do all of our schools accept the common application? Do some of them accept the common app and some of them don't? Who has early decision options? Who has a scholarship deadline that's really early in the process? This is going to help you to organize your work efforts in terms of what you need to do first and what can wait till a little bit later. And also, again, help you minimize the number of things that you're doing so that you're not doing unnecessary work. Before you go any further now that you've got all that together for your first set of schools that you're pretty sure you're applying to, we're going to start to sketch some things out. So we'll start with which application type do we want to use for each school. So we've got the common application. That's used by a lot of schools, including Rutgers. There's a SCORE application that is about 150 to 175 schools accept the SCORE application. You can take a look at that list on their website. Some schools accept a school-specific application, and that includes places like Rutgers and Pitt and Penn State that also take the common application. Then there's some group and regional applications like the University of California system. You apply to many UC schools on one application. Of course, you do have an application fee for each, sorry. Same with the Apply Texas application. Now, some schools are going to accept many different applications, but you still want to submit just one. But you're going to need to do a little bit of work to figure out which one you want to do for which place. So one of the important key things to know is that the common application allows you to submit only 20 schools can be applied to on the common application. So if you know that you're going to have a longer list, you want to take a look at that list and see which of those schools you can move off of the common application. So if I'm applying to 25 schools, and that includes Rutgers and Pitt and Penn State, those three would be great to go ahead and do with the school application. And then maybe I know that I'm also applying to UDEL and somewhere else that uses the SCORE application. I think TCNJ does. I can move those over to the SCORE application, and now I'm down to 20 for my common application. So that's the kind of work you want to do to get organized up front. You don't want to get yourself into a place where we're later in the process at the end of December, and now you're realizing that you have no more room on your common application to submit applications to some schools that maybe were really important to you. Once you've done that, you also want to think about which application type you're using for each school. You can apply to 0 or 1 schools under early decision 1, which is usually a deadline around November 1st. That is binding. If you get in, you are withdrawing your applications from all of your other schools. And so it's a one and done. Congratulations, you got in. That should be a place that you love. There is also an early decision round 2 that is usually around a January 1st-ish deadline. You can apply to an additional school in that round if you're already not committed to someplace in an earlier round. There are a small handful of schools that offer restrictive early action and single choice early action. So basically the deal there is that they care where else you are applying early, and each of them has some different rules. So what I recommend is that when we get back in the fall, we've got all your schools together, I can help you take a look and make sure that you're not breaking any of the rules. Most of our students will apply to a fair number of their schools under early action, which has generally October, November, sometimes as late as December 1st deadlines. Then we have regular enrolling. So you want to start to chart out your priority list. And we can talk about some of those things in the fall as well, as I help you prioritize for schools that I know are really important that you apply to earlier in the process rather than later. In general, we don't recommend that students submit their applications to most schools before mid-September. So one of the reasons is really that we're not able to send out your transcripts until mid to late September at the earliest. That is the time at which your senior course schedule is really finalized for senior year, and that your counselors are able to turn our minds to starting to process college requests, because before that we're dealing with a lot of scheduling stuff. Another thing that's key to know is that once you hit submit on that application, it is a done deal. You can't go back and edit your essay. You can't go back and add more activities to that activity list at many of the schools. So you want to make sure that thing is as good as it can possibly be before you submit. Now, there are a handful of schools where I do recommend, hey, if you're ready to go, submit it earlier. That includes Pitt, Clemson, the University of Central Florida, a couple of other large southern schools. That being because those schools have application pools that tend to apply earlier. Many of them have some limited housing, etc. But for lots of other schools like Rutgers, for example, whether you apply on August 15th or October 31st does not make a difference to them. You get exactly the same consideration either way. So for those schools, there's really no bonus at all to rushing things and putting in something that may not be your best work. Note that as we're working through the process, as long as you're following all of the things that we kind of put out there for you in regards to timelines and processes, and believe me, this is just the beginning of it. I will never be accused of being a subpar communicator. You will get lots of communications to me throughout the fall, letting you know what's coming up, when you need to get things in. As long as you're following those directions, we're going to get your things out on time. Our goal is to make sure that all 580-ish seniors, or whatever number we will have next fall, that all of your materials get out to all of your schools on time. As long as you follow the directions, we ask that you please trust the process. We've not missed a deadline in the 7 years that I have been here, and we send out a lot of stuff. So as long as you get your stuff done, we will get our stuff done. All right. So some tips for getting through this. We're going to have a manageable list. We're going to use our summer to get ahead. So as we move forward through the rest of this presentation and a couple of others, I'm going to have some concrete things that you can do over the summer, and give you some tips as to which things you can do that will take them off your plate entirely. You want to make sure you're following directions, and then when we get back in the fall, that you are asking for help when you have questions. You are not on your own through this process. We're not just throwing you in the deep end of the pool, but we also don't know you're struggling if you don't reach out to us. So we'll communicate with you. You need to reply to us. Communicate with us when you're having trouble so that we can help support you through everything. We've got a lot of resources available. If you go into the slideshow, you're going to get these, and these are things that are going to be repeated umpteen times over the next 6 or 8 months as we go through the application process. So what are some things that we can do right now? Well, we have to get really familiar with SCORE. So what is SCORE? So some of our families have older children. You've used Naviance. SCORE replaced Naviance for us. So it gives us one place where we process everything for you, no matter which application you are using. It is a place where you communicate between the student and the counselor. On SCORE, you'll show us where you're applying, what application you used, when you applied, etc. It helps us to know what needs to be sent out because it's programmed to tell us that. We'll track our decision results, etc. Some students may choose to use a SCORE application, but even if you're not using the SCORE application for any of your schools, if you're using just the Common App, you have to use SCORE to communicate with your counselors about where you're applying. Because if you don't, we're never going to be able to complete your application file. So you need to use SCORE. And what's great about SCORE is that it is very, very transparent. You can see the status of the document your counselor sends. You can't see your teacher letter recommendations, but you can see that it's been uploaded. You'll see everything so that you'll know exactly what's going on. So what are some one and done things that you can do this summer and get them off your plate so that you don't need to be revisiting them next year? We're going to start by talking about the FERPA waiver, and I'll show you the details about what that looks like. Earlier this spring, we spoke about teacher letters of recommendation. Hopefully by this point you have asked for 2 teachers, so I'm going to show you how to enter those. We've got a couple of other things, including a student brag sheet survey, a parent survey, and also an activities section. You can knock every single one of those things out and submit them this summer. And then you can start setting up your SCORE My Colleges page to show us which schools you're planning to apply to. So let's go through some of those things so you see what they look like. When you first log into SCORE, if you have not completed the FERPA waiver, you're going to see something that looks pretty much like this. There's a box right on the page that says FERPA waiver and a Get Started button. You'll go ahead and click that and you'll get access to this. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Basically, it refers to whether or not if you go to a certain college, let's say University of Delaware, let's say if you go there, you're admitted, you go there, in the future, do you want to be able to have access to your application file and the letters of recommendation within it? So what you'll see here is that colleges would prefer for you to waive this right, so to grant that right so that you will not have access to those things later. So why is that? Because it gives them some more assurance that your recommendation is truthful and honest. Now, do you have to be worried about the contents of your recommendation? I really don't think that you do. The reality is that if a teacher does not feel that they can write a strong letter for you, they would have declined that recommendation request in the beginning. So the recommendations that we're writing are strong letters, or we've never even gotten that far. So we would like to see you grant this waiver request, and then you'll hit submit. And then it's the only time you're going to need to do that in SCORE. You will need to do it again later in the Common application, but you cannot do it until after August 1st. But we'll talk about that in the Common application video. The next thing you can do is if you've already asked your teachers for letters of recommendation, you can go on in and put those requests into SCORE if you have not already done so. So you'll go to My Colleges and then to Application Documents. Sometimes you don't see the word Application Documents, you just see this little paper. Go ahead and click on it. On there is where you'll enter your recommendation request for your teachers. That will allow them to be able to upload their letters once they complete them, which is usually in the fall months. Also, over the summer, we'd like you to go into the surveys section of your SCORE account and go to the student brag sheet and complete that. This is going directly to your counselor, and it is being used by your counselor in the preparation of their letter of recommendation. So there is, you don't really have to worry about the content of that being read exactly by colleges. Doesn't all have to be in complete sentences. But it's just going straight to your counselor. So everything you would like your counselor to know for inclusion in your letter of recommendation, go ahead and make sure you put it there. There's also a parent point of view in the same spot The parent can do that through the student's account, or parent, you can also do that through your own account if you prefer. Finally, one more piece of information that counselors use in writing your letter of recommendation is they'd like to see what kinds of activities you've involved in, what kinds of achievements and honors you've received. You can access your student profile and then activities and achievements. So if you're on this personal details page, you can just click on it over here, or you can just scroll down and you'll find it further down. You can update that document. If you already have a regular old resume that you've done in Google Docs or something, that's fine too. You can just share that document with your counselor in lieu of doing the activities and achievements section. Really, we'll take either one. We're just really looking for that information. The other thing that we need to be doing once we've completed all of those things is we need to start working on our My Colleges list. So there are several different columns. They're suggested, which are schools that have been suggested by a parent or a counselor, following some schools that you're thinking about. I'd love to see you have a nice long list there of schools that you're thinking about. Applying, which are schools you're definitely planning to apply to. By the time we come back in September, we'd really like to see most of your schools in that column. We want to see you have a fairly good idea of where you will be applying. I know your list isn't going to be final, and that's okay. But we do want to see most of them moved into that applying column. That kicks off a lot of things on our end. It lets your teachers know what schools you're gearing towards, what deadlines you're gearing towards. It lets your counselors and your teachers plan for what deadlines you'll be needing. Are you an October 15th kid, November 1st, December 1st, etc.? It helps us really schedule out the work that we need to do, again, to make sure everybody's things are done on time. And finally, applied. You'll be moving schools into that column once you have hit submit and applied to the colleges. And that gives us the trigger to know when to send out your materials. So again, this is what we're looking at for that My Colleges screen. You'll see all the different areas. You can add them by hitting Add a College. There's other places that you can do it throughout the process. You can drag and drop them, just move them to the side. So if today I know, okay, I'm applying to Fairfield, FDU, and Mason, I can just drag these over to the right. It'll ask me some questions when I do drag those over, like what application cycle I'm using. Make sure you're using the right one for when you'll be applying to colleges, which fall, which cycle. And it might ask some other things about what types of applications you're using. If you don't know those things at the time, that is okay. You'll have another opportunity to fix that stuff when you drag it over to applied later on. For families, for students that will be doing have fee waivers or doing early decisions agreements, there's other documents up here in that application document section, but we'll really get to those things in the fall months. So now, what are a few other things that we can concrete do in the summer months? One of the other things that we talked about very early on in this process were the teacher to counselor feedback forms. That is something you're looking for 2 teachers who can give some input to your counselor for the use in the counselor letter of recommendation. What you can do is, if you have not already asked 2 teachers for that, what you can do is you can get the link either from this presentation or from your My Drive section in SCORE. It's linked right there. And you can either email teachers over the summer, or you can write that email and then send it to go out at the beginning of the school year to teachers. So it'll be right at the top of their inbox in the fall. That could be a really good idea. Another thing you'll do over the summer is parents and guardians. You'll, as part of the mass number of forms that you get access to in Genesis sometime in August, you'll get a transcript release permission form. So we'll need you to sign off on that, authorizing us to send out your student's transcript wherever they request it. We don't just send it out willy-nilly. We send it only where the student requests. But this keeps us from having to ask you each and every time we want to do something for your child. The other thing to do over the summer is to finalize your testing plan and register for any ACT or SAT exams that you will take in the fall. You don't want to wait until later, as you may find that there is not space at your desired testing center. So if you kind of nail that down a little bit in the summer months, that would be great and really, really helpful to you. The next thing we'll move on to is creating application accounts, which will be located in a separate video so that you can move on to that section when you're ready. We'll be talking about the common application, and we'll also have another video about creating self-reported academic records. So how to self-report your grades for schools. Thank you very much.